Good evening. Welcome to the Dialogue with Werner Herzog. It is our great honor to have well-renowned filmmaker Werner Herzog with us today at the University of Hong Kong. We've here with us a very special crowd, 148 selected audience from documentary and film industries, journalists, teachers, writers, artists, architects, students, historians, NGO administrators, businessmen, lawyers, diplomats, anthropologists, ecologists, and so on. We share the same identity tonight here. We are fans of Werner Herzog's films. Tonight, we're also joined by audience in Taipei through online streaming. They will share a few questions with Mr. Herzog throughout the night. And we would like to thank the Hong Kong Academy for Performing Arts and Intuitive Media for making this live streaming possible. On behalf of the organizer, Hong Kong Documentary Initiative and Journalism and Media Studies Center of the University of Hong Kong, we'd also like to thank the Hong Kong International Film Festival Society, Goethe Institute Hong Kong, and our strategic partner and sponsor, Lee Hyson Foundation, to support this event. Now please invite Ruby Yang, Oscar winner, project director of Hong Kong Documentary Initiative, to say a few words. Ruby.
Thank you very much. We really fortunate to have Werner Herzog, the renowned filmmaker, to have the dialogue with us. And Hong Kong Documentary Initiative was started 3 years ago with the funding of Lee Hyson Foundation. There are three components to the documentary initiative. One is a seed grant, second is master classes, and third one, dialogue with filmmakers. And we have actually, Catherine, project manager, tried for 2 years to get Mr. Werner Herzog to come. And you know, she's very good at writing very good email, and really, so thank you. And actually, I'd like to thank Lucky. Yeah, he's producer of Werner Herzog. Actually, Catherine wrote to him for over 2 years in order to make this happen. Oh, you reply right away. Thank you so much. So without further ado, may I introduce Mr. Werner Herzog to the stage.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. I know how much work there was behind it. And it's in the detail. Nobody sees how many hours, how many people have worked on putting this together. And it's not only the festival or this event tonight. We do have a retrospective of 20 or 22 of my films. So there's an enormous workload.
Yes.
And many of those who have contributed are not visible tonight. So thank you all for this.
Yes. Please have a seat. Yes, filmmaking is always a collaborative effort, and actually, I personally, my Facebook for the last 2 days have been plastered with your pictures. Fans taking pictures of you and with you, and you talking on stage, you visiting various places in Hong Kong. So just some very standard questions. How do you find this city, as from a filmmaker's point of view?
I was here too short time to have any real idea, but it is obvious it's a stunning city, stunningly beautiful and extremely vibrant. There's enormous amount of life. And first thing I did was I went to the fish market to see the real people And I would go, for example, in England, I would immediately go to the football stadium.
The real people.
Yes, when
Yes.
you watch Liverpool playing Manchester or so, that's where you really see the people. And I like to have this direct, instant contact.
Yeah, there's even before we start, Mr. Herzog is already giving advice to us as filmmakers. You always look for the real thing, real people. That's what documentaries are about.
In a way, yes.
Okay. All right, and we'll go on and move to the Q&A sessions. And also, may I remind you, before you ask your questions, please introduce yourself by saying your name and organization. And we have 3 helpers around here helping us to pass the microphone. So, who's the first question? It's, anyone. Okay, I have from here David Robinson. Where are you?
Oh, yeah, back
Okay, there he is. Pass him the microphone, please.
Hi, I'm David Robinson. I'm a teacher at North Anglia International School in Hong Kong. I'd like to ask, you've mentioned Facebook already. Facebook's been in the news a lot the last couple of days. Based on your last documentary, Lo and Behold, would you delete Facebook? And if so, what would you replace it with? And do you think... that's all I'm going to say, that's fine.
Okay. I don't... No, it's an easy answer. I don't have to delete Facebook because I'm not on Facebook. And I'm not on Twitter, and I'm not on whatever. And I do not have a cell phone. Not that I'm not nostalgic, but for cultural reasons, I do not want to have a cell phone. And I want to examine the real world, not through applications on a handy. I can give you an example what I mean to say. When I edited Lo and Behold, Reveries of the Connected World, the film on the internet, my editor's girlfriend would visit us almost every day. And after a month of coming from nearby by car, a mile away, she frantically made phone calls. She could not find us. What happened? Her GPS was down. And it was only 5 blocks down, and then to the left, and then to the right. But she never examined the layout of the streets or the buildings and how many traffic lights. She would only examine it through her GPS, through the internet. And I found it very significant. And I was really mystified that after 30 times visiting us, she could not find us. And it was the easiest thing.
Thank you. And we have a second question somewhere. That lady there? Yeah, you. Pass the microphone to her, please.
Hello. Many of your films...
Your name, please.
Oh, sorry, my name. Sorry.
Yeah.
My name is Tessie Ward, and I'm a teacher here in Hong Kong. And many of your films feature people who believe in something as if they are in a trance, and sometimes they're in a trance for real, like in Heart of Glass. Can you share something personal about why you are interested in these kinds of states of being?
That's a complex question, although it sounds easy. But I've always been interested in our human condition. And some of the human condition that I am fascinated in is, for example, fever dreams in the jungle. And that's why I did films like Aguirre, The Wrath of God, or Fitzcarraldo and others. You're mentioning one film, Heart of Glass, where all the actors play under hypnosis, under real hypnosis. And it's not a gimmick. It's not that I wanted to show something very special and funny or so. The story is the story of a Bavarian village in the 18th century that lapses into collective sort of almost insanity or trance or somnambulism, and they walk into a foreseen and prophesized disaster, that's described to them, and yet they move into this catastrophe. And I thought for a while, how would I stylize this? And then all of a sudden I thought, why shouldn't they be under real hypnosis? However, I did not know, can you be hypnotized so deeply that you would open your eyes without waking up? Second basic question was, do you, under hypnosis, make contact with somebody else under hypnosis? So we tested it, and since that was okay, all the actors were playing under hypnosis. And I had to learn it myself because we had a hypnotist who was a complete new age pseudo-philosophical babble idiot. And I couldn't take it any longer after 2 sessions, and I had to take over. But there is a very deliberate idea behind it. And it's a question of stylization. How do I stylize somnambulism? How do I stylize human beings who are into fever dreams? How do I stylize a whole cast that was only midgets? Even dwarfs started small, very early of my films. And until today, I'm kind of trying to explore the deep, unknown recesses of our soul.
Okay. Do we have a third questions from this gentleman there? Wait for the microphone, please.
Hello, my name is Yao Ning, unemployed teacher here. I'm here to steal from you, Mr. Herzog. I was wondering, do you have an event or something you know it's out there, you want to film it, but you also know you won't get to do it because maybe you won't live long enough or some other thing?
Because of what I did?
You won't live long enough.
You won't.
You know, maybe it's the completion of a building that will happen. You know, John Malkovich made a film that wouldn't be released until 100 years later. I think it was something like that, right? I was asking kind of the opposite of that question.
No, I'd better make a film and release it right away. But of course, it has become a complex question nowadays because the instruments of distribution, like the classical, let's say, movie distribution, is sinking slowly and in degeneration. So is television. It's going down, and at the same time we are witnessing an explosive evolution of the internet. And that's where we have interesting immediate sort of possibilities for distribution of films. However, with certain caveats. I don't have to tell you about what the internet can do and the kind of stupidities and vile and debased things are explosively created at the internet. And so we have to learn how to use this instrument properly. But the great advantage is that you make a film and it can be shown instantly, and it's instantaneously almost worldwide. And so that's what I really like to see, however, with certain cautions.
Take another question. Seems that all the 3 questions so far are from teachers. And that lady there sitting with the MacBook. What are you doing with your MacBook? Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Herzog. My name is Helian. I'm a freelance line producer for Brand Content videos in Hong Kong. My question is, how do you balance between a subject that you're genuinely interested in and what you think is good to show the audience, or it would sell better, or is there ever a conflict?
A conflict between?
Conflict between, like, you think what sells better and what you're genuinely interested in when you do a documentaries, like interviewing a subject.
That's hard to answer because I would do a film only if I'm totally fascinated of the person or of the story. And it would be so, I would do a film only when I know it's so big that what somehow coming alive in my mind will find its audience. There's a story, let's say, Grizzly Man. I knew it was so big, the story was so big, I had to do this. And I knew it would find audiences. So you know that when you're into real filmmaking and into storytelling. And it was actually a film that I, in a way, wrestled away from a production company and wrestled away from somebody who was halfway undecided whether he should do the film or not. And I said to him, no, I will direct this movie now. And I said it with my worst German accent. I will direct this movie now. And so, and all of a sudden I was in business. And you see, it's coming at me sometimes like without too much thinking, and so I instantly know that what's coming at me is really big and has its own force. Sometimes like burglars in the middle of the night, you don't know why they come into your home, what brings them in here, but you have to cope with them.
Yeah, just this part of an interesting thing about filmmaking. You have to say, I want to take over this thing in a way. I want to do it, be determined.
Yes, what's interesting in this case, I asked immediately when I stumbled into it, or the story stumbled into me, and I immediately started to ask about the status of the production. It had to start almost immediately in 10, 12 days. And I asked the producer, who has also made some films, but mostly producer, and I asked him, and you have to listen very carefully. Now I asked him who is directing the film, and he said, I'm kind of directing the film. Kind of directing the film. So in other words, I sensed he was not sure whether he should do it and how to do it, and that was when I said, no, I will do this film now. And he was kind of relieved and glad that I took over.
Yes, do I see a hand over there? That lady in the green jacket? Is the microphone working?
Not just speak into it, I think it mentioned, yeah.
Hello, my name is Jen Zhang. I'm now working for the South China Morning Post and in the video team. Yeah, I first know you in Nancy and Ruby's class because I used to be a student here and study documentary production at their class. I used to write an essay about the sound effect into one of your documentary, Into the Inferno. Yeah, I watch a lot of your films and I really like it. I realized that there is a strong personality into your films, all the films I mean. My question is, how do you put your personality into your movies, like almost every movies, and how do you build this kind of style? And another thing is that some people may super into this kind of style, into your personality, but other audience maybe think it's kind of distracting sometimes. So how do you think about this? Yeah, thank you.
I do not have any ambitions to implant myself into the films, but it has turned out that audiences like to hear my voice and not. No, it's not just the voice. You have to make a clear distinction because I wrote the commentaries, and it has a certain authenticity, and of course it's a performative sort of voice, and it has been an element in my films that has resonated with audiences. And that's the only reason why I do it. Otherwise, you do not really see me in my own films sometimes as an extra somewhere quickly in the background. And you see me in films by others, like Jack Reacher, where I play a villain confronting the protagonist. I was pretty good as a villain Because, yeah, I had to spread fear and terror on screen, and of course people think, yeah, he must be a terrifying sort of person. I don't think that is a correct impression. I think I'm not like that, but I like a performative part of what I'm doing.
Now, I think we have some questions from Taiwan, is it? Yes, so we'll go to there now. Now to Taiwan. We look at the screen.
Yeah, okay.
Oh.
那你要怎么样看待这样子的风格？那第一件事是因为怎么样沉浸到自己观众会有一个那这部分你怎么看？
No, it's breaking up, sorry.
Yeah, we don't
Yeah.
have a proper sound here.
带入到电影里面。
We should try. Can we try to establish the contact a little bit better and then try to
we'll do it later
connect,
then maybe.
because this doesn't get. Unfortunately, the young man is trying to say something, but it's the problem is the sound in this case. Yeah.
Okay, let's get back to Hong Kong here and.
Yeah. Or can somebody from, just 1 second,
Sure.
Do we have a possibility that somebody, this young man, sends an email? Or,
maybe typed it out?
Or type it out as a SMS, as a brief message, and then we can answer.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
That's,
because we should not leave Taiwan out because sound connection is not right. They are knocking. They are knocking at our door here, and we should take it seriously.
Yes.
Let's have a question from here.
Sure.
And
Sure.
then
That
we'll see
lady
how it
sitting
works.
there. Hi, Li Wei.
Hi, my name is Swan. I'm a student at this university. With regards to Grizzly Man, because you brought it up, there is a scene in which you tell Jewel that she must absolutely not listen to the audio tape and that she must never ever see the coroner's photos. With regards to this film, with regards to this scene, I felt that there was a deep compassion and kindness that you had towards her at the time. And I was just wanted to ask a general question of how do you retain a certain kindness and compassion, whether it's towards your subject or your topic at hand, as a documentary filmmaker, both from a personal perspective and also from a filmmaker's perspective?
Well, the answer is simple. I'm not a robot, and I'm not speaking to robots. And of course, when it comes to such horrors of the death of two young people who were very close to Jewel, to the young lady who has been an associate of Timothy Treadwell, who was attacked and eaten by a bear. So, of course, I have heard what's on the tape, and that's what nobody should ever hear, what I've heard. Secondly, I have seen photos at the coroner's office, some of the remains of Timothy Treadwell and his girlfriend, Amy Huguenard. And again, nobody should ever see what I have seen. And it has happened in a similar way with a series on films on death row candidates, on people who were waiting for the execution, and I made 8 films, and there was a particularly horrifying case of a young girl who just had started to walk and to speak, and she was murdered by her father or her stepfather and her mother in a botched exorcist ritual. I mean, unspeakable. And I wanted to have photos from the homicide detectives of the crime scene, and I said, please leave the photos of the victim out. And they showed me, they projected photos, and all of a sudden there's a photo of this girl. And they quickly try to switch over to the next photo, again a photo again of the girl, and again, and then I said, no, I have to walk out. And the same night, I woke up because I heard a scream. And I woke up, and it turned out that it was me who screamed. So, in other words, I'm not a robot. And from that moment, it was clear I would not continue the series of films because the television network, Discovery Channel, actually wanted me to do 4 more films. And I called them next day and I said, no, this is it. And there's a certain economy with your own emotions. So not only with the emotions of human beings who are in front of your camera, there's also somebody behind the camera.
We got a gentleman there.
Hi. My name's Robert Godden. Just sort of continuing from that, but to maybe a broader level. What is the impact of making these films on your view of the human condition? You mentioned before that you're very interested in that. And so over the years, making these films, has it given you a more positive or a more negative view of the human condition?
I think I cannot divide the world into whether it's positive or negative in what my worldview is. There's always a certain complexity when you are dealing with human beings and when you try to explore what is going on. So I try to avoid to divide the world into good or bad or into positive or negative. And so, but of course, doing the films that I have done has given me a lot of insight, more than, for example, all my time in school has given me. So a single film, a single day of shooting sometimes would outdo 5 years in school. It's an intense profession, and it has to be approached with an open mind, but at the same time you have to know that there are certain limits, and there are certain limits of discovering and explaining the world. Although when you look at my films in their totality, and I mean the feature films and documentaries and all sorts of other things, there is a worldview in it, but not simplistic into the world is good or the world is bad. Do we have contact to Taiwan now? Or?
I'm not sure if the connection will be working, so I'm asking on behalf of them because they send me questions in English. Which one is more important in filming documentaries, the subject or the director?
Oh, the director doesn't count. So I think it's always the subject or the substance of things, and many of the films I have made, I'm sure many of the young filmmakers, even here present, could have made themselves. Of course, you have to understand what the craft is and what the possibilities are, and you have to have a fairly clear vision of what you are doing. Otherwise, you would lose yourself easily. But the director isn't that important.
Okay, let's take one more from Taiwan.
Taiwan, yeah.
What gets your attention the most in Taiwan? Have you been to Taiwan?
I've never been in Taiwan, but I do have my attention. I've been invited to Taiwan, for example, by Edward Young, a filmmaker who was very, very fond of my films, and I think he started to become a filmmaker because he loved my stuff, and he said, you have to come to Taiwan. And I looked a little bit into what was Taiwan all about, and I decided I would like to come, but I would like to go into the mountains They're very serious, very, very high mountains. Nobody talks about it. And there's very ancient sort of people there who speak their own language, who are very mysterious mountain people up there. And if I go to Taiwan, of course I would speak to students and show my films, but then I would be straight up in the mountains.
So our Taiwan friends will remember this.
and they're really big, serious mountains.
Yeah. Anyone from Taiwan here in the audience?
Yes, there we have a few.
Maybe we can give a question.
Am I completely wrong about Taiwan too? No, at least...
Anyone from Taiwan got a question, maybe?
At least I have some sort of curiosity. Maybe we can give the microphone to the gentleman here, here in the center of the row.
Okay. Sorry.
Yes.
Oh, for the question or about Taiwan?
No, let's... since I have never been in Taiwan, I'm just fantasizing, I'm sorry.
No,
but
you're
I'm
right.
curious.
Yeah, they're like...
Your name, please, sir?
Oh, my name is Jeff.
Yeah.
I work in a production company and creative agency here in Hong Kong, and I was also a student of the Masters of Journalism here. There are, I think, 9 indigenous tribes that live in different parts in the mountains, and they have their own culture and they have their own different way of life. You know, so yeah, I would like to see a documentary from you.
No, I'm not speaking about that. I want to do a documentary. I want to be there.
Oh yeah,
I want to climb, and I want to eat their food and learn how to cook their. I want to have their spices, their recipes, their songs.
Yeah.
It's not that you always have to make a film.
I recommend the night markets in Geelong.
Okay, yes.
All right,
that sounds like a plan.
Oh, but I recommend you should go with a whole group of people because you want to try as many things as you can.
Yes.
So if you by yourself, then you can, you have to finish the
I
whole
wouldn't
thing.
know what to search for.
Okay. Is it invitation or the question? You do have a question, really?
Okay, my question is, I know that you have highly recommended a book called The Peregrine, and so I would like to know what's your favorite thing about it, and what impact has it made on you as a person, as a filmmaker?
Well, I recommended it for various reasons, and I'm speaking now to the filmmakers in particular, and those who are students of other subjects. People do not read enough anymore. Normally, when you look at even at university students, they are not reading enough books anymore. They are too much on Twitter and on Facebook and whatever, and they take their shallow informations from the internet via Google or whatever. And for young filmmakers, I keep saying the craft, the basics of filmmaking, you can learn in a week. You don't have to go 4 years to film school. It's very depressing to spend 4 years in film school. You can learn a few technical things, but you can learn it while doing things. And The Peregrine now in particular, by an unknown writer, J.A. Baker. It was published in 1967 and has become some sort of a bestseller. And many people now are pushing it for several reasons. Number one, it is very simple observation of peregrine falcons that were at the brink of extinction in the United Kingdom. There were only 14 healthy breeding pairs of them left. Today they have rebounded to some extent. And it was like observing the very last few remaining peregrine falcons. And the observation is with such intensity and such incredible passion. You have never seen anything as passionate, and that's how, as filmmaker, we should look at the world. We should look at people with this kind of intense compassion and joy, and so. Besides all of that, has prose of a quality we have not seen since Joseph Conrad. When you read short stories by Joseph Conrad, it's about that kind, not throughout the book. There are moments in it where you read a paragraph that you have never seen of that quality in English language. It's phenomenal. And I think it's very much worthwhile for young filmmakers. Read this book. It's more worth than a whole year in film school.
And do we try to start to communicate Taiwan again? Hello?
Hello.
Yes, we
Hi.
Yes. There's a... Yes, can you try and ask a question?
我的问题是，你认为性
No, it still doesn't work. We have to have it via text messages. Let's try text messages with Taiwan.
I want to ask, what's your attitude toward faith?
Attitude for what?
What's your attitude toward faith? The idea?
Faith. Faith.
Faith like religious faith?
Religious, F-A-I-T-H, is it? Faith?
Yeah. I'm sorry because it's not easy to understand, but we have some sort of contact, yeah. I try to give an answer about faith. I can give it in certain portions. When I moved a ship over a mountain in Fitzcarraldo, I kept saying, you cannot solve it with cash money. It's only faith that moves mountains. It's never been the money. And it has carried the film along in a way. And otherwise, religious faith, I had a dramatic religious phase when I was an adolescent. It disappeared fairly quickly, but I do understand the religious sentiment in the soul of people that gets engaged with religion and the kind of consolation that people find in religion, consolation in a world that cannot be deciphered completely and that can be very scary. And of course, the question of our own mortality scares many, many people. And the only consolation in this case that we have is religion. So, and they are those who really solidly rely in religious faith systems are fairly lucky.
Any more questions from Taiwan or one more?
If okay.
Hello.
No, this is
still not working. Okay, I think this is not working. Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. We have. I'm sorry. No.
Good thing Elon Musk is a good person.
Okay.
Good person? That's all I heard.
Yeah.
Good person.
That's
okay, I think we go back to Hong Kong.
As much as the internet is advanced, we still have some hiccups. But let's continue with a simpler form of text messages.
Yeah.
This is counterproductive. I wish I could understand it. I wish I could answer directly. Let's go through text messages.
Yeah, and so we take. Oh, this lady here.
Yeah.
Here. Oh.
Hi, I'm Iris. I'm actually a student in Hong Kong U, and during my free time, I do some artworks too. And I know that you don't go to a film school. Actually, you stole a film camera from a school and you start filming. And I think you don't like film school and you don't really advocate people going there. But then I know like these years you started teaching film courses like in master class or some short courses in the States. What do you think, what makes you change your mind, and what do you think is the most important thing to actually teach these young filmmakers? Thank you.
I never had the plan to do a master class, for example, or to actually start it as a counter position against all the film schools as we know them, by founding my own rogue film school, which is guerrilla style, and you learn, the only things that you really learn is lock picking or forging documents, like forging a shooting permit and things like that. So it's fairly wild. It's wild stuff, but it points to a certain approach, to a certain way of life, to a certain self-reliance, and that's what I try to tell young filmmakers. Do not wait for Hollywood to invite you to do a big film. They do not come. They will not invite you. You have to take initiative, and today you can make a feature film, even for theaters, with a cell phone, and we have seen that. So I don't like this culture of complaint, oh, money is not interested in me. Just do your film for literally no money. And the reason why I am starting to pass on what I have learned in many films is that a huge amount of young filmmakers are approaching me. They want to either learn from me or be my assistant in one of the films. But there are so many. It's a gigantic avalanche that has. I'm not exaggerating. It's really big. And I try to give a systematic answer, an organized answer, because I have the feeling, with all the privilege that I have had to make these films, I have to share some of my experiences. And Masterclass, which is a company in the United States called Masterclass, you can learn playing tennis, for example, with Serena Williams. Or you can learn acting with Dustin Hoffman, and you can learn about architecture and all sorts of things. So, and they invited me to do a master class, which is online. And it's very, very intense. It's no nonsense. You see, I saw, for example, some actors doing a master class, and they make little jokes and this and that. You don't waste your time. It's 6 hours, really intense, and on all and systematic. It's on various aspects like film and music, or editing, or how do you survive in the business long term. All sorts. How do you deal with actors? How do you make conversations on camera in a documentary? So there's a lot of things that I try to pass on, and I do it seriously. It's not a joke, and nobody can watch it 6 hours like this, because you would probably lose your mind over it after. It's enough to see it in 15, 20 minutes increments. I think you had a question.
Hello, Mr. Herzog. My question. My name is Steven. I'm a teacher in Hong Kong, and my question was about creativity, and if you've ever felt blocked creatively, and what did you do to unblock or find the path of the inspiration? Yeah.
Sorry, I've never been blocked. So it's an unknown sort of thing for me, and my problem is that I can never keep up with the amount of things that are coming at me while I'm sitting here. And I just showed my last film, Into the Inferno. There are 3, 4, 5 other projects. While I'm sitting here, I'm already working on a film on Mikhail Gorbachev and some other projects, so I have not been blocked, and I wish the burglars would not come at me all the time.
I think there's a gentleman who's trying to ask a question. The gentleman at the top there. Okay, it's your turn.
Hello. Hi, my name is Long Yin Lin, and I'm a director from Taiwan. And
okay, good.
I did spend 4 years in film school, and I can confirm it's quite depressing. So my question is that many people associate your films with some certain extreme natures, either with environment or with the humanities in general. And what does the concept of extremeness mean to you? Do you think it's a exposition of our origin, or some new possibilities, or something else?
Well, cinema has some very basic focus, and of course we are not really that much fascinated watching somebody doing their laundry. It's not a cinema. We are much more fascinated by stories that take us into wild adventures or wild fever dreams, or into human beings that are tested to their limits, because only then we learn much more about ourselves. It's like when you're a scientist and you are testing, let's say, a metal alloy. You put it under extreme radiation, under extreme heat, under extreme pressure, and all of a sudden you would understand the inner nature of this metal, of this piece of metal. And cinema works in a similar way. But of course there are simpler forms of cinema, basic forms like that I call movies, kung fu films, movies, or I would say Fred Astaire, whom I like a lot. And it's basically a man who is dancing. Or films like Mad Max, kinetic energy, two cars crashing into each other at very high velocity. So this kinetic event, this enormous force of movement, that's also a very fertile area of filmmaking. I've actually never been into car crashes. I've never made a film with Fred Astaire. I wish I had lived a generation earlier. I would have liked to make a film with him. I always wanted to make a film with Michael Jackson, for example. He's such a great mover, and so they're not born very often. But I don't know whether I really answered your questions. But, yeah.
Okay, maybe that gentleman here. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Andy Lewis. I'm a filmmaker, kind of. I'd like to ask if do you feel like you've ever been manipulated by the subject of one of your films, or is that all a part of the process?
Was it
manipulated? Do you ever felt manipulated by the subject that you filmed?
That's an interesting question. I don't think so. Maybe secretly somebody ever tried, but not to my knowledge. And cinema has something very revealing. You can tell right away, for example, that somebody is lying to you. You know it instantly, because cinema has a quality that starts to reveal layers of truthfulness or layers of lies. I don't think so, and sometimes, yes, I would allow people to lie to me, for example, into the abyss. A young man who was executed 8 days later, and he tells me he spent 10 years in prison because when he committed his crimes, a triple homicide, he was 18, spent 10 years in on death row and then was executed. And he, kind of saving his sanity in this crazy situation of being on death row, talked himself into a position being innocent. But of course, I had looked into the case files, and the film doesn't mention many, many details. For example, that there was a young woman who was at the crime scene when the murders happened, because I did not want to make him look too bad. He still had a last appeal for clemency going on. And he completely convinced himself, believing in his own narrative, that he never had anything to do with it. And I allowed him to tell me that on camera. And you do that sometimes because, again, there's a human being who will be dead within 8 days. And you are sitting in safety on the other side of the bulletproof glass, and you are sitting next to a camera. So there are situations where you do allow somebody to lie to you. And I can accept it easily.
So, okay, this gentleman here. Here, you, yes.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to follow up on that question. My name is Bradley Aaron. I work for the University of Virginia Tibet Center. I'm also a photographer. And going with this theme of lying, you expounded this concept of the ecstatic truth. And I wonder, now that you're living in the US, I think, with Trump and with all of the sort of bombast and just the falsity and all of these things, is there something of this ecstatic truth in the world today that's out there in the sort of zeitgeist? I don't know.
No, ecstatic truth does not correspond, for example, to fake news. Okay. And fake news is nothing new. It is absolutely nothing new, and we know from the earliest documentation of political life, we know it from Egyptian pyramids. I think, I believe it was one of the Ramses pharaohs who depicts himself in paintings and in mosaics as a great victorious sort of slayer of nations and conqueror of the Hittites. That's how the facade was. But we know there's a surviving text of a peace treaty which points at a battle that was inconclusive, which neither side won. So he made it up. So from the earliest evidence we have, there were fake news. And we had them all the time in Roman antiquity, the Emperor Nero, or in Russia, for example, the Potemkin's villages, somebody building up facades of villages to make his area looking very prosperous and very neat and impressing Katerina the Great, who was traveling through in her coach. So Trump is nothing new. And we have to understand that with the internet, of course, fake news spread with much higher velocity than we have ever seen it before. And I have to point out, just a few days ago, I came across a story which was during the elections. And we have the name who spread the fake news, a retired engineer who was grumpy, over 70 years old, a grumpy old man, puts on the internet that the two Clintons, Hillary and the Bill, were together into child molestation, they were together into cannibalism, and were together in child sacrifice, human sacrifice. Within less than a day, 2 million people clicked on it. So it's a sensationalistic aspect of the internet and the highly controversial nature. And of course, the internet has one quality that's easy to understand. And excuse my French, the shit always floats to the top. So, so you have to learn how to deal with fake news. And we have to learn how to sniff it out, and in most cases it is very, very easy. there was no child sacrifice committed by the two Clintons. Period. We don't need to hear their voices.
Oh, this lady here.
But may I add something about ecstatic truth? Truth normally is not just with the facts, it's way beyond that. And what truth is, nobody of us can really describe. Neither mathematicians or philosophers can tell us what it really is. But we have a sense for it, how by stylizations and inventions and by poetic fantasy we can point at a deeper truth. And my simple example is Michelangelo, who did the sculpture of the Pietà, arguably the most beautiful sculpture that was ever created in the history of art. Jesus in the arms, taken from the cross in the arms of his mother. And when you look at the face of Jesus, he is a 33-year-old man. His mother is 17. His mother is 17. So my question is, did Michelangelo try to give us fake news? Did he try to cheat us? Did he try to lie to us? No, he tried to find a deeper truth about the very nature of Christ and the very nature of his mother, the Virgin. So that's a very simple example. And what is going on in political life, and it's not only Trump. We should not go into the business of Trump bashing. That's an easy thing. It happens on every single side, and it happened since the pharaohs, and probably much earlier before we had written evidence.
Hi, is it on? Yes. Sorry, my name is Anna. I teach here. In your documentary films, which has nature as one of its themes, you often explore the sublime of the nature as well as nature's absolute indifference towards humans. And what I want to ask is that as a filmmaker, what is your attitude towards climate change? And do you think that the general public has a wrong attitude towards climate change? Thank you.
Climate change, I think everybody who walks on this planet with open eyes sees that we are not treating the planet appropriately. And I think China has massively understood and is taking measures. And for example, the directives of creating electric cars is on a scale that we have not seen before. But of course, all this is not really enough. And ultimately, nature itself, which is indifferent to us, it doesn't love us. It's indifferent to all human endeavors and to all species and creatures. But when you violate nature, it will hit back. And there's a time that can be foreseen where there might be a world in not too far future where we have no human beings left. And we have not a good survival chance. What survives much better is a lizard or a cockroach or microbes. They have the better chance, and we better look carefully what we are doing. And you probably know about a film I made on the internet, Lo and Behold, Reveries of the Connected World. Among others in the film is Elon Musk, who has a dream of colonizing Mars with a human population to save us if this planet here collapses. And I think it's a wrong idea. It's not only a stupid idea, it is utterly wrong, because we should focus our attention in making our planet as habitable as possible, and not try to improve the habitability or inhospitability of a planet like Mars. We do not belong there. We do not deserve to be there. we deserve to be here. So that's what I have to say about ecology.
And I've got questions from Taiwan. Catherine?
I have a quick question
From
from
Taiwan?
because
Yes.
it's related to what you said. Do you think Elon Musk is a good person?
No, good or bad is I do not know him enough, and we should not argue, is he good or is he bad? He's a absolutely fascinating personality, which comes at the time of gigantic revolutions in manufacturing, for example. And I like him for that. I like him for creating the Tesla cars, and I like him for creating now batteries. I think it's not finished yet, or reusable rockets. Not easy to deal with him because he's a very shy man. He's totally shy, and journalists have never managed to really deal with him, because you would ask him, a journalist would ask him a question on live television, and he would think about it for 2 full minutes. But 2 full minutes is an eternity. You have to measure how much 2 minutes actually is, and he sits there and thinks for 2 minutes, and everybody thinks, is he catatonic now, or what happened to him? And then he will give you an answer. So you have to tickle him. You have to evoke things from him. And I even made him laugh. I wanted to know what he's dreaming, and he said no. And then lowered his head, and then he said, "Do you dream?" I said, "No, I do not dream. Sometimes, maybe once a year. And the last time I dreamt was that, and it's boring. Last time I dreamt was that I had a sandwich for lunch." And all of a sudden he laughs, and he was completely on my side. And then he says, I do not, after long brooding, and I filmed him, and he's thinking, and he says, "Well, I don't remember my dreams, I only remember the nightmares." And he has never said anything like this in public. So that's, for the filmmakers, you have to tickle them sometimes and get something out of them.
Okay. This gentleman here? Yes, you.
Good evening, Mr. Herzog. My name is Lei Ging, and I am a teacher, I am a writer, and I'm a bookworm. And last night, in the post-screening talk, you talk about all good directors read a lot, and I'm very envious of you that you could read Latin and also Greek, and you're so versatile in your reading. And could you elaborate a little bit on your world of book reading?
It's unsystematic. That's number one. And by the way, I hated Latin in school. I hated ancient Greek. But I became more curious many years later. But I read out of curiosity, and very often I follow leads of very trusted friends who really know about literature and about books, or even things that are not literature, high literature, for example. Errol Morris, who reads voraciously, one of the finest filmmakers that we had. He reads, and he said to me, "You have to read, there's a book written by a failed lion tamer in a failed circus. And it's heartbreaking. It's very badly written, but it's heartbreaking in a way." So I follow leads, and I would read what I must read according to my friends. Same thing with me. I pass on to young people. Read the Peregrine, read Virgil, Roman antiquity, and other things. And when I have a real good book that I read, I do not keep them. I pass them on to some friends, and they probably pass them on as well. So there's no real system in it. but there's a great joy in reading, and I do believe that without intense reading, yes, you will be a filmmaker, but a mediocre at best. The real good ones are all people who read. And I give you a few names. Terrence Malick, for example, Errol Morris, Francis Ford Coppola. He even has his own library, and when he was big into his big films, he even had his private librarian. Just think about that. It sounds crazy, but many of the real good ones are people who read.
It's a good question from Taiwan.
I'm going to ask two questions from Taiwan. Can you share a memory which you treasure a lot? And
a memory that I treasure a lot, yes, has nothing to do with the film. It has to do with my younger son when he was 5 years old, and I had a telescope, and there was full moon, and I trained it. I aimed at the full moon, and the first time he saw the moon and the mountains and the craters, and this kind of complete amazement and awe in a child, that's something which is completely priceless. And I think when you're a parent of children, once in a while you have to do things like showing them the moon through a telescope. It's just something that comes to mind. I'm sorry if it's too personal.
we love personal questions. And the next question is, how do you decide whether a project goes to documentary or movie?
I think all I do is movies. They're just movies, and when people ask me about my documentaries, my first instinctive answer would be, I do not make documentaries. They are partially invented, they are stylized, they are cast. There's casting like for, in a feature film, actors. My documentaries are always very, very well cast. And you see it in Into the Inferno. The leading character in the film, the volcanologist Clive Oppenheimer, he's extremely well cast. A very likable, a very vivacious man who is a real great scientist at the same time. The people with whom I'm dealing in the film, villagers, tribal villagers in the Vanuatu archipelago, or scientists who are excavating human remains in Ethiopia. So it's casting, and that's something that you normally do not do in feature film, in documentaries, or stylizations, even inventions. And it goes so far that at the beginning of one film, which is called Lessons of Darkness, before you, and it was on the fires in Kuwait, where the entire country was set aflame. Every single oil well was burning. When the Iraqis retreated as a sign of revenge and hatred, they put all the oil wells on flame. And it was not just an ecological crime, it was a crime against creation in a way. And it was an event that gave me the feeling there's something bigger than a political event. There's something cosmic about it. And the film starts with a written caption on screen, and it quotes the French philosopher Blaise Pascal. And it says, the collapse of the stellar universe will occur like creation in grandiose splendor. And it says Blaise Pascal under it. However, it was not Blaise Pascal who wrote it, I wrote it. It was my invention. And by the way, Blaise Pascal couldn't have said it better. So, why do I do that? I want to, in this case, I wanted to elevate the audience to a very, very high level before they see the first image. And I never let them down from this very elevated level that this is almost science fiction. It's a planet. I'm showing a planet that we cannot recognize anymore as our planet. So it's a extremely high stylization, and it's purely invented. And the invention is like the mother of Jesus, who is 17 when he is 33. So, and I allow myself doing this kind of thing, but because of that, I have difficulties to accept that I'm a documentarian. You see, we immediately think about the wildlife films from East Africa or about some political films here and there. I have never done that kind of films.
Okay, that gentleman there in the middle is dying to ask you questions. Yeah, raise your hand, please. Yeah, you.
Hi, my name is Daniel. I'm a student here at HKU. I wanted to know about the act of killing and how sort of Joshua Oppenheimer's process in making that film was extremely well thought out, and there's a lot of effort put into it. And it's hard to imagine that he could have predicted such a transformative result that occurred with the characters in the film. I wanted to know what your opinion was of that transformation, and particularly how candid they were about the crimes they committed.
Well, in a way, Joshua Oppenheimer was seeking me out. He wanted to have my advice, and a friend and colleague of mine, Andrei Singer in London, with whom I'm doing the Gorbachev film now, his co-director with me, he said to me, I'm executive producer on a film, The Act of Killing, made by a young filmmaker, Joshua Oppenheimer, and he desperately wants to meet you. And I said, well, I'm here only for the next 40 minutes. If he's nearby, let him come. I was at breakfast. The taxi was already waiting. And Joshua came and barely said hello, opened his laptop and showed me 8 minutes a compilation of footage. And my heart stopped for a moment because I had never seen footage like this. I've never ever seen anything like this. So we stayed in touch, and he wanted me to give him advice. Basically, my role was to encourage him to do the most extraordinary footage and leave it in it. Some of the most controversial as well. So I had some sort of a role in it, mostly encouraging him. And Result is one of the films that you see every 20 years maybe, of that caliber and of that impact. And I'm very proud that I became friends with Joshua, and that I could give a tiny little bit of input. But not precisely, not in terms of how to edit the film or how to do this or that. It was basically creating a climate of courage.
Just in case you don't recall the film, The Act of Killing is a documentary about the massacre by the Indonesian military in the 60s. Yeah.
Yes, the mass murder of, I don't know, almost 1 million or so people who were considered communists or foreigners. Mm-hmm. Ethnic Chinese were among those who were also murdered, and it's something that we had not known publicly very much.
Yeah. Oh, okay, wow. The show of hands. That lady there. Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Herzog. My name is Nicola. I'm a filmmaker and graphic designer. So my question is, what are your observations on how storytelling has changed and or stayed constant over time since when you first started filmmaking till now? Thank you.
I think storytelling fundamentally has never changed. We probably had this gift of storytelling for tens of thousands of years. As long as there's human communication around a campfire in Paleolithic times. I do believe we evolved, we developed the art of storytelling. And you see it's almost like a deep human memory. And you see it when mothers start to tell stories to their little children. It's something we have in common as the human species that we are. And it has not changed much when you look at Hollywood films. Yes, there was more emphasis on storytelling at the time of, let's say, Casablanca. And today, much of it has been replaced by special effects, by merchandising, and by star power or star quality. And storytelling has, in a way, been partially neglected. And this is why part of Hollywood is looking at my films, because I'm good at storytelling. So they keep circling around it. They're curious what I'm doing. So, and what I'm doing is something very innate in human nature, storytelling, and it's never going to really change. I think not in the next 10,000 years.
Oh, okay.
A question from Taiwan. If Timothy and Amy in Grizzly Man are not both dead, but one alive, one dead, how do you approach the topic, or will you shoot it anyway?
If in the Grizzly Man, the couple, yeah, one of them still survives.
Had survived.
What will you do? Will you still do the film, or?
I believe so. It's, you see, you can only speculate. Probably yes. If the survivor had been Timothy Treadwell, I probably would have asked him, give me your footage because I know better what to do with it than you would. Because he was confused. He was confused about his attitude and his romanticized attitude of wild nature. And I would probably had him convinced, let me do this. If Amy Huguenard had survived, that would have been harder. I probably would have asked her to be a contributor to the film on camera, because we have very little of her. And we have very little of her because, number one, Treadwell never filmed her, with very small exceptions where for seconds you see her. He tried to stylize himself as the lone ranger out there who is separate, who doesn't have a girlfriend. He always had women around. And Amy Huguenard's parents would not allow me to quote from her diary, for example. There's a diary and letters from her. And I accepted it. It has to be off limits. For me, what is off limits? And had I seen Amy Huguenard as a survivor, I would have tried to persuade her to be part of the film and finally show up in front of the camera.
Okay, one more question from Taiwan.
Taiwan, yes.
Do you feel any cultural or linguistic effects on your filmmaking since moving from Germany to other countries, such as the US? And do you ever consider moving back?
I cannot foresee the future, but I'm happily married, and that's why I live in Los Angeles. Moving back to Germany, well, I'm moving where the stories are. And that was an interesting thing I experienced. I did a workshop for young filmmakers, and I chose 10. And it happened to be that 7 of them were young women filmmakers. I couldn't care less if it were women or not. And it turned out they had the better proposals and they were more intelligent and had the more exciting things. And one of them was Brazilian, and she said, I'm finishing all this now in Germany, and what should I do? Should I try to enter a career in Germany, or should I go to Barcelona because there is some good of an interesting scene, or should I go back to Brazil, to where I was born in the south of Brazil? I said, my instincts tell me you should go back to Brazil, but not necessarily where you into your hometown. Go where the stories are, where life is wild, where things are happening. Go there. And I think she's doing it now, and the same happens to me. I like to be in an area or in parts of the world where the stories are. That's why I'm in Vanuatu archipelago, because the tribal people there believe in a new god, an obscure American airman, John Frum, who possibly was never there on this island, but they think he's a new god and lives in the volcano. So those are real big stories, and you see the origin of a religion right in front of you. And I would go to North Korea because it's the most fascinating country to go and try to make a film, although of course you have your limitations. Or I would go to the Amazon jungle because it's full of fever dreams. And that's where I belong as a filmmaker, not so much to attach to a country.
Okay. Oh. That gentleman, yes, you.
Hello, my name is Kevin. I'm a student from City University. I just want to ask, like, from all the films you have done, which one do you think is which one are you most proud of? Like, which one do you think is your masterpiece?
I'm proud of all of them.
Okay, let's take a question from the middle. Yes, you.
Thank you. So I'm Gavin. I'm a lecturer at Hong Kong U. I was curious about the Julian Donkey Boy film, whether any of the dialogue was scripted beforehand, and could you tell a little bit about the process of acting in the Julian Donkey Boy film?
Happy you asked that.
Yeah, it's a film you're referring to, a film by a young filmmaker, Harmony Korine, a very, very talented young man. And he wanted me, he sees me as his father figure, as a filmmaker. And he wanted me to play the father of a crazed boy, a young man, and he wanted to play my son. When I arrived on the set, there was an actor there, and I said, Harmony, why are you not sitting in front of the camera with me? He had bailed out. So, and secondly, there was no Harmony Korine as an actor to talk to, and secondly, there was no screenplay. There were some basic situations. For example, I had to have dinner with my family. 2 sons, one a complete failure, the other one insane. The sister impregnated by her brother, and the grandmother who was completely gaga. And I'm there at dinner, and they had several cameras, and I see the camera lights are turned on, and I was still fiddling around, and I asked Harmony, he was standing nearby, are we rolling? And he nodded, yes, we are rolling. And I said, what's the dialogue? I had no clue. I only knew I had to put down I had to be hostile with my children and hostile with a grandmother. And I said, what's the dialogue? And he just said, speak. So, what can you do? So, and I really put my son down. I'm really nasty and awful with him. And then I didn't know what else should I tell. And instead of reading me a silly poem, he should do something as great as the end of Dirty Harry, where he blasts the bad guy and asks him, do you feel lucky? So, and it was just invented because of the pressure on me that I had to say something. There was no written dialogue.
Now I
But
remember it.
I must say I enjoyed it, and I'm good when I have to play a hostile person. Or like in Jack Reacher.
Yes, this film was shown in Hong Kong Festival 20 years ago, was it? Yeah, it's that long ago. Okay, this lady here, maybe?
Hello, Mr. Herzog. My name is Claudia Hinterseer. I'm a video journalist, and I'm curious to learn a bit more about the casting aspect of your movie documentaries. Like, what is it you look for? How do you go about? And could you give us some insights into that?
Yeah, casting. You have to, when you make films, you have to understand who is creating intensity and depth and a presence on a screen. And sometimes it's very unobtrusive persons. I do remember in the late 60s, I met Brigitte Bardot, a tiny mouse. You had no idea that she was a sex symbol. Or I met Isabella Rossellini, and she looks completely like nobody would pay attention to her when you met her in private during a dinner. And I thought, what is it that makes her so intense and so wonderful on screen? What is it that makes Brigitte Bardot a complete symbol of an entire epoch? And you have to have the eye for it. I cannot describe exactly what it is. If you do not have that instincts, and if you do not have the experience in the real world to understand this person is the right one, if you don't have that, you should not make films. And you cannot teach it, and you cannot really learn it.
Okay, this gentleman with a black shirt. Is that a microphone? Yeah, yes, please.
My name is David Clark. I'm an educator and a photographer. I want to ask something about the visual dimension of your work. Like, when does the visual come into it, into the process of forming the thing? Or maybe something more specific about the Hercules Seegers and what was so interesting about him, where that seemed to be some project you did that it didn't turn out as a movie, it turned out as an installation, it needed a different format or
yeah. I have to explain, you are speaking of Hercules Seegers, a Dutch artist of the early Rembrandt time, almost completely unknown. Even people who run museums, like the Whitney Museum that invited me to do an installation, had no clue who Hercules Seegers was. I found it very alarming. And I have to explain, he was considered a madman and an alcoholic, and had what is left are some very small prints that he did, very experimental sort of work, very stylized, and some art, early Rembrandt time, some art, some imagery that we have seen only hundreds of years later. Only from the 20th century on, we have seen imagery that he has created hundreds of years before the time of this kind of paintings or prints. And I always felt very close to him. There was somebody who saw certain patterns, certain structures in landscapes or in rocks that always inspired me, and I had seen similar things. So he's become a kind of a person who was close to my soul. And sometimes over long periods of time, and you all of a sudden recognize as if he were my brother. And the same thing happens in literature, that all of a sudden somebody talks to you who has died 200 years ago, and still the voice is completely alive, and it's completely like somebody who had been your brother unbeknownst to you until the moment. So imagery, of course, is something which comes fairly early into films. Of course, not into the films where I have no prior knowledge of what will come at me. I had no prior knowledge about the jungle, for example. And I described the jungle in a way that I said, I do not leave the jungle any choice to be different than my fantasies. And of course, you have to bring the jungle, the landscape, into an imaginative form that corresponds with your own dreams. But of course, a very deep question. We could sit here the next 48 hours and have a conversation and quote specific, let's say, painters, films, images, photos. You just name it. I can only give you a very, very limited answer.
Okay. That gentleman there. 有冇俾支咪佢？舉手繼續 raise your hand, please. Oh.
Hi, Mr. Herzog. I'm a student at HKU, and I actually am amateur editor for the school's film studio, and I know you are very good at encouraging your students. In fact, you actually eat your own shoes to do so. And but I want to know, do you ever have a sense of failure in the whole career? And if not, how do you manage to do so? And if yes, how do you overcome such sense? Thank you.
Yeah, interesting question, because of course I have had quite a few failures and I have gone through defeats. But the question is, when you fail at doing something as you had imagined and it doesn't have the standard of what you had anticipated, it's always a question, how do you learn from your failures? And when you are thrown to the ground, how do you get up on your feet again? That's a more important thing than the failures. How do you survive a failure? How do you learn from it? How do you improve? And it has been throughout my life that I have made mistakes. Not all the time, but they have happened, and most of the time they were painful. And you have, as a filmmaker, you have to learn how to cope with it. How do you deal with it?
Okay, the gentleman in the corner. I know you've been waiting for your chance.
And is there still something from Taiwan? Ah, yeah, okay.
Okay, next one.
Hi, my name is Harrison Collette, and I'm a student from the United States. So we touched earlier on the complexity of the human condition, and I wanted to continue with that theme by bringing up a recurring actor in a couple of your films, Bruno S. His performances display a type of emotional depth that's really rare to see in any other type of film, and I was wondering what impact working with him had on you, and anything that you could learn from someone you described as having an incredible amount of humanity and depth within him.
I find it extraordinary and very kind of you that you are speaking about Bruno S., because people normally focus on Klaus Kinski or Christian Bale or whoever, Nicole Kidman. I've worked with some of the best in the world. Michael Shannon recently. But the one who is exceptional and the deepest, the most tragic I've ever had in front of my camera was Bruno S. And I made two films. One is The Enigma of Kaspar Hauser and the other one is Stroszek. And I owe him a lot. Unfortunately, he passed away 2 or 3 years ago. So he's not around anymore, and I miss him. I never had any other film project where he really would have fit into. but he had a presence and an aura of tragedy that is unprecedented. There's no one like him anywhere in any cinema in any country. So it's worthwhile to see, for example, Stroszek or The Enigma of Caspar Hauser.
Okay, we have one question
Taiwan,
from Taiwan, who is the film critic of Taiwan who hosts the venue there, Zhang Zhengde. He said, have you ever considered to shoot another Science of Life after 50 years?
No. You do these films once, and I do not want to do Rambo 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or whatever. No, you leave it behind you, and it's a film that's very close to my heart. It was my first long feature film, and much of my adolescence and of my early and young years as a filmmaker, all in this film. But I'm not the one who would return and ruminate on a film. It's,
okay.
Please, yeah.
One more. What's your opinion on the influences of new digital technology and internet on the production or distribution of documentaries?
I think since the normal forms of distribution are all in decline, the theatrical releases and television is in decline, and we have extraordinary development in the internet, and we have to take it seriously. And I've been curious about it, and I have explored certain aspects of it. For example, a few of my films are on Netflix. Some of almost all my films you can find on the internet, and you can buy the films as a Blu-ray or as a DVD, and it goes through the portal of the internet. And arguably my biggest success I had on YouTube about texting and driving, which was a film sponsored by AT&T and then some other providers like T-Mobile and Sprint and Verizon jumped on board. And it has had an extraordinary impact. And it was YouTube. And I must say I take YouTube and some possibilities in this area seriously, because sometimes you see the most unexpected coming at you that's completely out of the blue and extraordinary. You sometimes see these things, but you have to be very selective. You don't need to be selective when it comes to the crazy cat videos. They're always funny. They're always a joy to watch. But of course, YouTube has sometimes extraordinary gems in it, and you have to sharpen your feelers and how you spot those things.
Okay. Cool. Okay, you're smiling. You. Yes.
Hello, I'm Etienne, and I'm a sort of a DOP because I studied cinematography at school. Question is, so as a daredevil, you've pushed boundaries and you've explored the world for decades. Has there like a moment in life where you just got held back? Like, what has been your biggest fear so far in your experience? Apart from Michael Shannon.
I didn't understand.
Say it again, please, because I'm not.
What is your biggest fear? What has been your biggest fear?
My biggest failure.
Fear.
My biggest
fear.
My biggest fear. I'm not afraid. It's not in my dictionary.
Oh.
But you didn't mention that you were afraid of Michael Shannon, right?
Of Michael Shannon.
Michael Shannon.
Why should I be afraid? I'm the one who gave him the leading part. The central character in the film, the first one. Before that, he had only done some small roles, in My Son, What Have Ye Done? He's the first time in his career the leading central character of a feature film. And it was me who gave him this part. And I tell you why I gave it to him, because he's the most talented of his generation.
Okay, this gentleman there.
Hello, Mr. Herzog. My name is Curtis, and I'm now a reporter. Would you please describe how's your young life, especially in the field of creating artworks or filmmaking? Thanks.
Your young life. Your
My-
life as a young man.
Well,
how does it contribute to your life in filmmaking?
I think filmmaking itself has kept me running and moving, and somehow I do not really feel my age. I could be your father or your grandfather even, and it doesn't feel like it. And I think the profession itself keeps you agitated and keeps you curious and keeps you in contact with very young people, very young audiences. So I think it's in this respect, filmmaking is a very fine profession.
Hey, hello, Werner. My name is Simon Leo. I'm a filmmaker. I've admired your films since I was 18 years old, and I want to thank you for always inspiring me to be a good soldier of cinema. Throughout your films, there's always these kind of astonishing images that kind of tell a truth that you can't really describe with words. My mind goes to the scene in Strassac where you visited the hospital with the babies, with the premature babies, and you see the grip that they had, or just the idea of, you once said that filming animals, there was a sense of them not trying to cover themselves up. There was a truth to them. And I was just wondering if you could say a little bit about the idea of collecting these kinds of ideas of images, or the way that you might find these kinds of images that say something more than what we can actually say with words.
Yeah. That's what I cannot really describe, but I try to look behind the surface, and I try to find something that is transcending the surface of an image, and that's transcending us as human beings, and I try to look somehow into the soul of human beings. And of course you come across, with this curiosity, you come across certain images, certain events, certain situations, like, for example, a prematurely born baby that, like a little monkey, premature babies have this very strong grip. You can even lift them up into the air. You can even put them on a clothesline and they would hang on to it desperately. And when they are born 9 months after conception, they still have this grip. You hold a finger to a little baby and they will hold on immediately, but you could not lift them up in the air anymore. So it's only with premature babies. Very, very mysterious and very touching how they hang on to life. And so when you are fascinated in these questions that I am, you would inevitably come across such human beings or situations. It's quite natural.
I just got a cue. This will be the last 2 questions. Ooh.
Do we have something from Taiwan still, or please try Taiwan again, because we shouldn't leave.
And maybe Mr. Herzog will pick.
No. You have to do it as.
Okay, very tough for me. Okay, you then.
Hello, Mr. Herzog. I'm Alina, and I'm a student here at this university. You mentioned that you read, but you also write. And you often say that you're certain that your writing is going to outlive your films. I wonder why you say that. Thank you.
I may be wrong. Sometimes I'm not the best judge of my own stuff. But I have the feeling what the prose texts that I have written have a more direct intensity than movies, because when you make a movie you have actors in between, and you have cameras, and you have editing, and you have finances, and you have psychology with a crazy actor, and you just name it. You have a torrential downpour of rain when you need the sun shining or so. There's always a lot of layers in between until you come to some result, and the result is cinema. When you write, there's nothing in between. There's only you and a little notebook and a pencil, and you write. And the books like Of Walking in Ice, I wrote like a diary when I traveled on foot from Munich to Paris in winter, because my mentor, an old lady, Lotte Eisner, a great, wonderful woman, was dying. And I would not allow her to die. And I walked like a pilgrimage up against it. And while I wrote, it's not that much the daily events or so, it's more the fantasies and the hopes and the fever dreams and things that I describe. Or, for example, Conquest of the Useless, which I wrote while I was working on Fitzcarraldo. And it has a very, very strong sense of words and language. And what is significant is that in all the travails and tribulations of making this film, and all the catastrophes that happened, I mean, we had plane crashes, we had my camp burned down to the ground that was built for over 1,000 people, and I lost my leading actor out of the film due to illness, and I lost Mick Jagger out of the film because he had to go to the world tour, and I wouldn't replace him, and I wrote his part out of the film. So constant real catastrophe, not invented things. They were real and every day, and you had to somehow still move on. And my last refuge, the last refuge, was not drugs or alcohol or religion or you just name it. It was language. The last resort that I have was writing, the language. And because of that, I believe it has a different quality and a different intensity than my films. So, and because of that, I have the feeling we should not only talk about my films. There's a background that may survive all the films as they are, but we do not know. We should talk in 150 years from now. Then we would know.
Okay, one last question.
Taiwan, yes.
Taiwan.
Let's go for Taiwan.
Okay.
Taiwan there. Yes, my salute.
How did you write the script to Even Dwarfs Started Out Small?
Even Dwarfs Started Small. I wrote it in 3 or 4 days. It was like a nightmare that came at me. And all of a sudden I saw an entire world inhabited by midgets. But meaning every single object, like this chair, would be like a monster. The world of our consumer goods had become monstrous. And a chair like this would be too high for a tiny person that was only 80 centimeters tall to even get into this chair. Or they cannot one of the tiniest falls in love with one of the young women, and they try to climb on a bed, and she's on the bed and he cannot jump up to it, and he takes a run and tries to jump on the bed, and he never reaches the plateau of the bed, so it's a failure, and it's like a very intense nightmare, and it came at me like almost like an avalanche, a dark avalanche, and it's really a dark film. And strangely enough, the film has caught on with very young people. Today I get a lot of mails of 15-year-olds who are getting curious about Even Dwarf Started Small. So, and because it was such an intense vision, it was very easy to write it down in one crazy, quick sort of writing it. 4 days, maybe 5 days, that was maximum. So these things happen, and normally I write a screenplay when I see the whole film in front of me, so I'm not sitting and I do not develop characters and I do not develop stories and I do not follow all these grotesque postulates of a 3-act story, and that the leading character has to understand his destiny and his task not later than page 29, and he should go through a crisis not later than page 60, and at the end of the film the leading character should come out as a transformed, changed man. Bullshit. I'm not into this. The dwarfs are desperate and wildly into they enjoy destruction, and they do it, and that's a movie, and it doesn't have 3 acts, it has 1, and it's fine that it is like this. So it's one of those films that has come back into the attention of viewers in a very strange way, and I like that it happens like this. Thank you, Taiwan, for asking this question, and thank you for your attention. Thank you very much. Good night.
I think we have one last thing to do, is to take a group photo with this very nice audience with us tonight. So will the photographer help us to set it up? And
Let's get closer to Werner Herzog. Sorry, let me move away so you get closer.
Mr. Herzog, can you come closer a little bit?
Make space. Okay. All right. 攞走部機唔該，前邊同事。係。Okay. It's good enough.
Good.
Yeah. Okay. Should we say something in Cantonese? So.
So.
Fish market.
Fish market.
魚市場.
Would
The
it be
mouth
too
doesn't look good.
difficult?
魚. Okay, let's say 魚. 3, 2, 1. 魚. Round lips, 魚. Oh, Herzog. Okay.
Okay.
Seal. Okay.
Say seal together.
Seal means smile.
I
Okay.
will give you the cue. So 1, 2, 3. Seal.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for coming. 多謝晒。